I want to welcome everybody to Wocstar Media's September Lunch and Learn. Today, we have some amazing women with us, and we're talking about telling our stories and taking a product, a book, from this publishing stage to production. We only have an hour, so I want to introduce everybody quickly and get to the questions. Dominique, why don't you start for us? Tell everybody about you. You're an amazing woman. I want everybody to know who you are.
Well, I'm Dominique Raccah, and I'm the publisher and CEO of Sourcebooks, and we are the sixth largest book publisher in the country.
Yeah, there's so much more to you than that, but I'm gonna leave it there. Candice, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Candice Cook-Simmons. I'm a C-suite media executive in film, television, and immersive experiences, and I serve on the board of directors for Playwrights Horizons, home of Stereophonic, the most Tony Award nominated play in Broadway history. And most importantly, and germane to this conversation, is I'm an attorney. I'm a managing partner at a law firm. I've owned a law firm. And as an executive producer, both on the creative side, but also an attorney, I both adapt, buy, sell, raise for these types of projects. And it's great to be here with you.
Thank you for joining us. Leah, introduce yourself, please.
Hello, everybody. My name is Leah Hernandez. I am an independent book publisher. We have two imprints, Young Authors Publishing and Muse. Across our two imprints, we've published over 50 books and are distributed globally. And a lot of the work that I do is to bring more people of color in the industry. So I sit on a lot of boards, and in both my board role and as a CEO, I try to create more opportunities for people of color to work in book publishing so we can see the diversity in the books and on the screen. I'm really happy to be here with you all today.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. Tanya, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Tanya McKinnon. I own McKinnon Literary, which is a literary agency. We tend to do upmarket nonfiction. We have a lot of award winners, National Book Award winners, Pulitzer winners, every kind of award, Lambda, every kind of award you can imagine. My authors have won it. We also have a children's book line. Obviously, we're particularly keen to focus on the voices of all women, folks of color, LGBTQ. We tend to be mission driven in that we're quite politically progressive, and we love work that sort of pushes the envelope and helps us better understand, the politics of the world that we live in.
Yeah, I want to really just say to everybody, I've worked personally to some degree or another with each of these people, and they're brilliant, and they align so perfectly with not only my personal mission, but what Wocstar is trying to do, which is push diverse stories out into the world so that we can see ourselves in what we watch and what we consume. And so I'm going to start with you, Dominique, about the idea of a unicorn. And I work with Gayla Jennings-O'Byrne, who talks all the time about unicorn companies that are these billion-dollar companies, right? And so I adapted that to the idea of IP. When I joined Wocstar Media, when we started Wocstar Media, I said to Gayla, the key to me is IP, is intellectual property that is brilliant, not just brilliant, but something special, something unique that we can say to the world, we want to tell this story. And both Tanya and Dominique have products that I'm currently either have contracted or we're working on the contracts. But Dominique, when you see a book come in, or a publisher, when you see a book come in, how important is it that it's adaptable, it's adaptation potential? And do you know immediately if a book is the right thing to sort of like give a wave, call Victoria and say, hey, you might be interested?
I think books are so special and really bespoke that a book's adaptation potential is usually not a key determining factor for publication, because really not all books are meant to be TV shows or movies, and not all TV shows and movies are meant to be books, right? So I think that's not like the top of the list, but you can see it when a book is perfect for film or TV. Like, it's usually very clear, especially if it's in a genre, right? It's easier to read an eco thriller and see the movie it could become than, like a quiet kind of story that it takes place in somebody's head, right? Like you can immediately look at a project and get a sense of that.
Yeah. Leah, do you experience the same thing when you look at a manuscript for the first time?
I do. And I would agree that not all of the books that we publish are going to be good for screen, but the ones that do, I feel like I know within the first few chapters. And even when I'm just reading books for fun, if I can see the scene in my head as I'm reading the book, that's how I know that it's a book that requires more attention and for us to try to make an adaptation happen.
So if somebody has a book that they are aware is, a perfect adaptation candidate, is that what you lead with? Like Tanya, when you have a client that has a book that you go, this is going to Apple, this is going to Amazon Prime, right? Do you go, we lead with that first, or is it always story, or is it what's your thinking there?
So for me, the book is king. So or queen. I think that what's on the page is the most important thing, and it's what I look for. And if it proves to be adaptable, that's gravy. That's great. But it's not what I go in looking for. It has to work as a book. And telling a publisher that I think it can be a movie, that's not, in my world, a particularly big selling point. It's great because we retain dramatic rights, so the publisher doesn't participate in that, right? So I think the publisher is happy if the book is, is celebrated in the culture. But I think, and there are some agents who do more kind of commercial, more work that's more of a commercial nature than what I do. I tend to do very upmarket and a lot of nonfiction. So I think if you're working in, let's say, romance genre, that can have a greater role. At the end of the day, though, I'm going to say this. In publishing, it's what's on the page. And that begins and ends there. And everything else is everything else. But an editor wants to see strong material that's voice-driven, that has great narrative, that works on the page.
Right. Do you think that the value eventually comes, is it like sort of a wheelhouse where, if a book is a book sales will go up, correct? I'm assuming with some sort of media that go, no? Is that not true, Dominique?
Not always.
I love that I'm learning.
It's not always. I don't know if other people want to speak to this, but I have seen adaptations where it just was very quiet. The whole thing was very quiet and not much happened for the book.
I'll tell you a horror story. So
yes.
I love
a horror story. Let's go.
When my child was young, she was in a preschool, and I would go to the local independent bookstore and chat with the independent bookstore owner. And I was looking at kids' books and just sort of, I'm always in a bookstore doing some kind of work research. And we were just talking, and, somehow the conversation turned to Holes, which was a huge best-selling children's book, right? And she said, I used to sell upwards of 1,200, 1,400 copies of that book a year. And then the movie came out, and now I sell 6 copies a year.
Oh, interesting.
So, I looked at her and I said, does that happen often? And she said, well, the culture is faster now. If they can watch the movie, why would they read the book? And I have to say, that really stuck with me.
That's interesting. Because I know for myself personally, especially if I love something, I want to consume it on every level, So, for example, like I'm thinking about rereading Presumed Innocence because I loved the series and I was like, God, that book was so good, and I had read the book and when the movie first came out, and you know what I mean? So for me, it goes in every direction, but that's such an interesting bookseller sees it in a big picture. Yeah.
It's anecdotal, but her book sales were a kind of frightening record of what had occurred there.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm saying that, I guess Twilight, the movies drive the books and the books drive the movies, but I'm not sure that's the case for every single book.
Right. So Candice, now when it comes to let's say an author has a great story idea, they have like like a unicorn idea, and they write it up, and they want to, how important is it to protect the IP, and what are the steps that you see as an attorney to protecting that content and not get it? I think you froze. Oh no, we've been having technical glitches all day.
Did.
Just as she was about to drop knowledge. There you go. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, hopefully okay.
Right.
So, and I see this from a variety of ways. I think the first way I'll answer it is whatever the work is needs to be the best of that work. And
Correct.
so it needs to be in that vertical the best. Because there's no such thing as a piece of work that automatically needs to go to, let's say, an Apple, or that needs to go to an Amazon, because the reality is the ecosystem buying that. They may not be buying it because the work hasn't come out to cultivate an audience for them to see the need and the necessity. And a great work in that space then changes what's being driven by culture. And suddenly people have an appetite for it. But we have to guide that. And that is not always evident by virtue of what's currently on the market or doing well. In the 90s, I'll never forget, Toni Braxton essentially said she came out with a short haircut, and then she had long hair and all of these things. And she said, stop asking men what they want. Men don't know what they want until you show them. And she was talking about record executives who were like, nobody is going to buy your album looking like this. They don't know until you've shown them. And the same is true in so many ways when it comes to art and genre and timing, and things like book talk that have changed the way people look at it. So to your point about, well, then how do we protect it? The first thing that everyone has to do is sort of identify what they have that's protectable and how they can protect it. So I think it gets convoluted. People will say, well, I definitely want to, trademark the title. Well, you can't do that, right? You can only do a series. So if you've only done one book, that's not happening. But as you do the series, you can then protect it. The first thing I would
Wait, say that again. I want you to say that again. So you're saying it's
if
not
you
that
have one book, and let's say the book is called Lunch and Learn.
Mm-hmm.
You are not going to trademark the title Lunch and Learn for that book. But if Lunch and Learn becomes a series that's published, that can be protected. The series of the work can be protected. Mm-hmm. So the Babysitter's Club now suddenly is able to be protected. Sweet Valley High, you've got this range. But it's also, as a creator, it becomes very difficult to tell people your idea alone is not what's protected, right? It's the execution of that idea. So what have you put pen to paper? A princess and a prince and a witch doth not protectable IP make. Like that is it. And so really we're looking at copyright, right? Making sure that the work is appropriately copywritten before you submit. And that, taking a step back, for not authors who have already published, but for authors who seek to publish, that's very much so why people have submission guidelines. So I know it can seem sort of in this world of, if you're really hungry for it, you do all the things and you submit it anyway. No, you actually don't. One, you're probably waiving some of those rights because there are automatic boilerplates that essentially say, if you sent this to us and it didn't come through your agent or your manager or your lawyer, then you're waiving those rights. And while a court may later say, well, we're not going to allow a layperson to waive their rights, there's an argument to be had there. There's also do you want to have to go through that litigation in the first place? Being able to follow instructions. It's just one of those things where, are you great to work with? Probably not if you can't follow.
Let me interject for a second. So I want to, you gave just so much good information there. So you said it's what are you protecting, and then how are you protecting?
That's right.
So let's say I have a book idea. To protect it, is it smart to go on Book Talk and start saying, hey, I have this story about this girl who goes to lunch and she learns, and I want to write a story where it turns into a mystery, and I break it all down and I throw it out into the universe? It is then unprotected, right? Do you first
your idea is not going to be protected anyway. So it's
the execution of that idea. I mean, the story. Yeah.
So the idea, if someone said, I have a great idea, off the top, fantastic. So does everyone.
Well, let me be more specific then. I'm saying, let's say I have a literal book that I want to use guerrilla tactics like Book Talk and things like that, and group editing and group spreading the word. Am I relinquishing some of my protection by doing that through social media?
Well, I think if you have a book that hasn't been copywritten yet and you're going on TikTok to talk about it, then that's not guerrilla marketing because you're not really marketing it yet. There's
even
not
if they're self-publishing.
There's not. So if you are if you are seeking to be a self-published author and you have a finished work that is in a tangible medium that's been cemented, then at that point you have common law, right? But you still should you should file with the Copyright Office to protect it because again, it's cute to want to have inside, maybe it's a mystery and I want to get your input. Well, at a certain point, are you now creating a variety of derivative works? Like at a certain point, copyright.
Right, it's locked. Right.
It's like if people are giving you input on this mystery through TikTok or however you're doing it, and you are now changing the nature of the work, then one could, a savvy person who gave you the idea could say, well, she started making these derivative works off of my idea that I submitted to her on TikTok, and here's the record of it, and I'm glad it's a hit. Now I want my piece. I mean, I don't think that it would be a savvy choice for a writer. I think the first thing you do is get federal protection. You are granted, when you submit the work in a tangible medium, there are common law protections that happen as a writer that you are afforded by virtue of cementing that work. Is that something that you want to take into a courtroom if you got to that phase? No, one, you can't go into a courtroom because you see someone who had a similar idea. That's not enough. But two, the reason that you want to file your work in the Copyright Office is because now you've got an additional layer of federal protection that comes to you, and that helps you in terms of damages. The likelihood of success at an initial stage, to be transparent, is not that great. But what ends up happening is if this work was legitimately taken, and that happens, there are bad faith actors all the time, and they do very well, you've now upped your damages. And what if you are able to prove success, even on appeal, then suddenly you've got treble damages and all of those things. So copyright the work, trademark the things that are super cool about the work. So to the point about, what works in the culture, if there's slang in the story that you created or that is just catchy, don't be caught after the fact not having the trademark for that language, because one, it can take up to a year to get the trademark. So like do that on the front end. Even if only your grandma buys the book, maybe the name catches and it catches up with you later. So I would focus on that. And then you can trademark slogans and all of those things, but that brings you into ancillary merchandising and things like that, where you want to be able to have, you're not going to trademark everything, but you'll trademark the things that matter. And that's nebulous, right? It's very subjective, but your reader, to the point that was made by Tanya about what starts with the page, your reader is going to help you determine those things that are incredibly sticky. And that's when a book talk comes into play. That's when a Reddit comes into play, because the subculture that loves the work is going to actually promote the work. And you'll be able to say, when we were working through this book, we didn't even realize that was the thing that resonated. But this is what they love. Let's lean all the way into that. Jack is a hero. We all hated Jack. We almost edited Jack out of the book. And that becomes the thing that makes it really special. So the borderline or the main points, copyright the work before you go talking about it. Your idea is not protected. So if you have this brilliant idea and it's not cemented to the page tangibly, fixed in a tangible medium is the language, then there's not much. You can do something, but you can't do something.
Is there legal, is it legally sound to do I think it was called something like the poor man's copyright, where you mail it to yourself? Is that true still?
I mean, the short answer is no. I'm never going to tell someone not to do something like that. It's almost, is that a copyright that I would say is sufficient? No, it's not. What that does do is, if you're fighting over a date and it's never been opened, then what people were hoping the poor man's copyright would do is, if your work was shown, the first inception of it was 1992, and I've got this never been opened, federally stamped envelope that says 1978, then if we're fighting over dates, mine preceded yours, and the judge can open it, we can do an affidavit and all of those things. a judge, again, you're still not getting treble damages. So, okay, yay, like that's great, but that does not help you. The copyright is what legally, a properly affixed copyright. Again, you get common law rights. That's enough. That works. But what are you trying to get? Most aggrieved artists who feel like their work has been stolen want two things: proper recognition and then financial recoupment for what someone else was able to do by taking their work. Will a poor man's copyright successfully achieve that for you? Not really.
Not really. Okay, I want to back up a little bit and talk about, just even if there's somebody on here, maybe, in 5 years they think their book might make it to an AMC, but what are the roadblocks and what are the green lights to getting something published? And Dominique, I'll start with you. So what do you think, when you get a proposal, what are you expecting to see in a book proposal? I've looked this up and I see so many different bits of advice about what should be in a book proposal. Do you prefer it come from an agent? Do you take cold submissions?
Well, okay. I mean, I always say don't care, and then my folks
immediately regret it.
And then my folks tell me it's not so great that I don't care, and they care more, right? So, so I think agents have got a really important role in the world. I mean, I love the agents that we work with, and I think, so if you can have an agent, that can often be better. But we know that there are groups of people who have trouble getting agents, and as difficult as that is to admit to one another, we've opened up doors to make sure that we are talking to lots of different populations, so that we're really we have a view on that. So the thing that the place where I see the most need for aid is, I don't know if this has happened to other people who are on this call, but I sometimes open a submission that reads as follows: there has never been an idea like this in the world. This is the first time that this idea has ever been brought forth. Now, I have to tell you, there are somewhere around 300,000 new books published every year. And in the history of the world, there is likely to have been a book that is similar enough to yours to be a comparison, just thinking. So that always is a bit of a turnoff. I would prefer if they did the research and went into a bookstore and got a view of what's actually occurring in the environment.
Yeah. Leah, do you have anything that you want to share?
Yeah, I would agree with that. We typically take authors that aren't agented. I love our agents and have worked with really great agents like Monica Odom and her agency, and they sent us great work. But there are so many barriers for people of color to get an agent. And so I think what I would like to say, if there's somebody that's on this call that's an aspiring author, I think it's important to know that there are more than just the big five out here. I know that may be a hot take, but we have Sourcebooks, who's the 6th largest book publisher in the world, but it started off as an independent publishing company.
That's right.
And so I would love for people to just know that there are a world of independent, small to mid-sized publishers that exist, and do the research to find those people, because there are so many publishers who want those authors and who want your work. But I just don't think enough people know that they exist. The other thing that I would say is a barrier to entry, I think this is more on the publishing side too, is comp titles. So going back to your book, this book has been made before. This is not the only one. You are not the unicorn in the room. I think a helpful tip is to go to your local bookstore and figure out what your comp titles are. What are titles that are similar to the work that you're talking about in your story, and give the publisher that, or the agent that, because that gives us a better understanding of where to place your book. There are barriers to entry, but that's on the publishing distribution side. I don't know if this is a call for that, but there's returns that I would like to see changed in the industry. Things like bookmarking and all that stuff that make it really difficult for publishers to do the work to sell the books.
Well, we can come back to that, but I want to, Dominique, did you want to say something really quick?
I just want to add to what Leah's saying, that you really, you know, it's absolutely possible. If you're on this call and you have a book and you think, I'm the only person who's ever done this book, that's fine. Think about a book that's like yours. Perhaps it has a similar storyline, it has a different, a similar approach, same, same settings, same kind of genre. And then an easy thing to do is just to say to the publisher, and and times this, right? Like it's, add this element, right? Kind of like they do in for movies and television,
Yeah,
right?
it's the comps, right? It helps people who maybe can't see it see it.
Yeah, see it.
Yeah, yeah. Tanya, can you talk a little bit about the agent's role in this process?
Yeah, so I'm really anal about my proposals. I'm just really OCD practically about them. So, and because I do a lot of nonfiction, I sell a lot on proposal. So one of the things that is a red flag for us is if you can't successfully summarize your project, right? If you can't summarize it, I'm going to say chances are that you cannot, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
If you can't summarize it, chances are that you can't pitch it effectively. So I don't care if it's fiction or nonfiction. You have to be able to encapsulate your ideas in a way that feels powerful and fresh. Now, this comes back to the idea of voice, right? Writers with strong voices are able generally to summarize their work in ways that feel fresh. And writing is funny because it's happening word by word, sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph. So there's no way to fake not being able to write. And I want to separate that from this idea that you can't learn to write better or learn to write well. But it's like going to the gym. You can't sit on your couch and eat Lay's potato chips for 5 weeks and say, I'm losing weight. Nor can you not write daily, not have a rigorous daily writing practice and think that you're going to sit down and churn out something beautiful and meaningful, right? It's a muscle and you have to work it every single day. And that's why when you encounter people like journalists or, people who are writing with great frequency, they're sometimes able to create compelling work more quickly and more effectively, right? So the point is, if you're sitting on the couch doing the literary version of eating Lay's potato chips while dreaming that you've got the great American novel, chances are you're going to open with a line like, this is the most amazing thing that's ever been done, because you're delusional. So I would say, don't be delusional. Think hard about your work. When you pitch to an agent, it is like pitching to a publisher. Don't be sloppy. Write an amazing pitch letter to me. That's the beginning of the process. And by me, I mean any agent you're pitching to. If you don't have control over your pitch letter, I'm going to be really mean, but I'm the mom who tells her daughter the dentist will hurt. Okay. So if you can't write a good pitch letter, it's very unlikely the rest of the material is going to be amazing. I'm just saying, how you do anything is how you do everything. So the pitch letter should be one controlled page. What are you saying? Whether it's nonfiction or fiction, my ideas about carrots grow better in this dirt, or I'm writing a novel about a woman having an affair, whatever it is, it should be tight and clear, right? Then you should say quickly who you are. Are you a writer that's already been recognized? Have you been to retreats? Have you won awards? Are you in your kitchen writing for the first time? Say it. I'm a first-time writer and I live with my husband, my son, and our 3 dogs. Just say it. One sentence, fine. Just don't pretend to be something you are not, right? Particularly in fiction, we never know where the next Anne Rice is coming from. No one does, okay? So nonfiction, lay out your credentials. Fiction, be honest about who you are. If you had a short story published in a magazine, say that, and stay away from catchphrases or think about dating. Would you want to go on a date with the guy that had some cheesy line? No, don't give us a cheesy line, right? Tell us simply who you are and what you're doing. It's enough. If you've got to overpitch me, I immediately assume you don't have the goods. I'm sorry, but when I send a proposal out, if it's good, I don't have to overpitch it. In fact, if I have to overpitch it, I'm not going to take it on, because the work should stand for itself. And this is where people have to believe. You have to believe in your writing. You have to do the work, and you have to work for, and for God's sake, workshop your writing before you send it to a publisher. Get a little writing group together. 5 other people who want to write. Go online, search for a writing group. Take a class that's writing at a local college that's offering night classes. Get a group of people that can comment and say, hey, I like the premise of your idea, but I think your work should be a little more character driven. It seems like it's too plot driven right now. That's valuable feedback for you to have before you ever get to a publisher, before you ever get to an agent. Because, the average publisher in commercial publishing has probably 15 other submissions on their desk when I send them something. My job is to separate my client from the pack, right? I can't do that with weak material. I can only do that when your material is superlative, right? And so I always say to my clients, aim high, fail high. I say it to my child too, aim high, fail high, right? So be serious and mindful about what you're sending to agents. And if you're unagented, what you're sending to publishers. I mean, poor Dominique and Leah, the last thing they want to do is open yet another letter with you telling them that you're the best thing since sliced bread. Believe me, if they start reading the paragraphs, they'll know. You don't have to tell them.
Yeah. How do you, and I guess this is really an interesting question, do you deal with if you get somebody who's, maybe not as confident as another writer, but their work is maybe given to you at 80%? Do you bring them up to the 100 and usher them through the process?
Increasingly, that is the role of agents.
Yeah.
Because publishers don't want to buy potential anymore. They don't have time for it, right? They don't have, things have to work. So agents have sort of stepped in, and, I think it's hard to be an agent if you can't edit. You know what I mean? Like, you have to be able to bring your client's work up to a higher level before you send it out. Also, they don't understand the market the way you do. You're going to see things in it and you're going to be like, you don't want to do that. You want to do this. You don't want to be in this order. You want it to be in that order. This summary of chapter 3 is weak. Either we fold it into chapter 2 or we eliminate it. You need, I think, an agent who can help you see the work in that way. And also to help you shape a really smart proposal. So, I'm big on the role of introductions. You need someone who understands what a good introduction does in commercial publishing, right? So that's where an agent is really helpful for a writer, because she's helping you get dressed to go out on a date Saturday night. But she sees you Saturday morning with curlers in your hair and a mask on your face and, a pimple that's still red. We see the warts. And we help you, right, eliminate them and get dressed and be slick. And we help you understand the market. And, we prep you for meetings. Those are all the sort of maternal, loving things an agent is doing. Sometimes, and I hate to say it, but can you guess which of my clients are more confident and which less? Would it be the women who are less confident and the men who seem to not suffer so much from a lack of confidence? Not that there are not some women who are extremely confident, but I'm just saying, I tend to find one of the things we do is, to encourage a writer and say, we think you've got the goods on the page. That's why we've taken you on. That's why we're investing, because we're on spec. We don't make money until a client makes money. Right. So when we take a client on, it's because also if you're talking to an agent who's taking money ahead of a deal, that's an illegitimate agent.
Are there any other signs of somebody that could be less than reputable?
Standard commission is 15%. It's just very basic. Look at the list, see if they've published books with reputable publishers, right? So those are the sort of easiest telltale signs. If somebody says to you, we charge a $350 reading fee, that's not a legit agent.
Good information. What do you, and what do you think? We have 2 publishers on this webinar, but there are people out there that either want to do it themselves through self-publishing, or are afraid that, or have been rejected so many times they just go, I'm doing it myself. Do you think that is a smart route? Do you think that's a route that serves a writer who just wants its material out there? Tanya? Yes. Oh, Dominique, whomever. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking to the publishers.
No, I was. That's right. Dominique, go ahead. Maybe I wasn't clear. I apologize.
Yeah, it's all right. I'm actually at a conference of self-published authors. So
wonderful. Yeah.
I would say that that submissions come in lots of different ways. One of the ways that submissions can come in is you can look at a book and see that somebody else, that they have self-published, and there is a tremendous energy and excitement about that book. And I have certainly bought my share of those books. I have 15 books on the New York Times list this week. I would guess that 3 or 4 of them came in that way. So I think that that's certainly a thing. I also want to say one thing with respect to agents. I think it's essential to have an agent because, exactly as Tanya said, it really helps you to figure out what the idea is that you've actually got and really kind of craft it and make it beautiful before you hand it off to a publisher. I'm going to give some really ugly stats at this moment. My bet is that all of us are turning down about 90 to 95% of everything that we see.
Mm-hmm.
That's valuable. Tanya, were you going to add something to that?
I was just gonna say that self-publishing is completely respectable. Again, maybe do it with someone that, with a place that doesn't charge you an arm and a leg. Do it with an Amazon or something. Just be careful of the grifters out there is what I would advise.
Leah, thoughts?
I was just going to say, if you are self-publishing, I would still do the research that's required to put together a high-quality book. I think a lot of times self-publishers get a really bad rep because you cut corners on editing, you cut corners on design. And so, especially if you have the budget, because I too have acquired books that I've seen be really successful. And I'm like, you really need a distribution arm to help continue to push this thing. But the quality was great. The author did all the work for me. And so I would just encourage you all, get a reputable editor, get a high quality illustrator if you're doing children's book. And 2, go to your bookstores. When I was first starting, that's where the research starts. You go into a bookstore, you look at a book that's similar to you, you see what they have, and you create a checklist and you say, okay, well, my book needs to have these same things.
Yeah, and I'm going to add one more thing to that actually is going to feed right into Candice. So from a legal perspective, please God, if you are going to self-publish, I ask one thing: own your ISBN. Please God, own your ISBN, because Amazon gives you this free ISBN and then they own that ISBN. And if you try to do something else with it, so I hand off to Candice at this time.
The one thing I wanted to add, amen, yes to that. And the additional thing is, if you're going to self-publish your book, then you need to be very, very serious about marketing, because there is this idea, books need to be sold. And you may be self-publishing this first book, but it is the business but it's a literary business. And so if you're going to self-publish because you feel that this work really should be out into the world and you believe what your pitch is probably reflected, there's an audience for it, then if you don't convert that audience to sales, not only does that potentially hinder future work when you're talking to the same people again, and this time, instead of being a new author, you're a published author and you self-publish that first book, then they're like, great, how'd the book do? Dead weight. This is the time to essentially say, if you're going all in and you believe in it, then believe in it from its inception to its delivery. And you go and you do the heavy lift and all of the things, the proper illustrator, you make it a quality work so that you get a quality return. And then this way, even if you decide you only want to self-publish, that's fine, but you want it to be a choice, and you want it to be a choice where you're always at the height of excellence, not you use it as an out for a level of mediocrity. This is still business, sales, and conversion. And so that's it, because not doing great work doesn't just reflect on you as the author, but it's also an industry reflection. And people can end up saying, well, we saw a similar book, and it could be your self-published book and no one bought it. You want it to be, we missed it and we will never miss it again, and identifying it. So branding and marketing and quality across the board is critical.
Yeah. I want to shift a little. We have probably, I think, about 15, 20 minutes left. I want to talk to, say, the point where an author has a book, it's published, and they are approached by a production company, executive producer, someone like myself or Candice. Tanya, what are the things that you tell, how do you offer advice to an author in that case? You're muted.
When there's TV and film interest?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm just excited. I call them up. I say, we have interest. We're going to get on a call. Usually I attach a co-agent, right? Sometimes I work with an entertainment attorney. It depends on the nature of it, right? Whether it's a shopping agreement or it's going to be optioned or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
I like working with, I have a co-agent I like working with in Hollywood a lot. I think she's really smart. She brings our projects, to good people. One of the things that I say to my clients is that there's a lot of hurry up and wait in Hollywood,
Mm-hmm.
and that they should be prepared for that. And I also say to them, the money isn't what it was in the 80s and the 90s when everybody talked about how incredible the money was, and streamers have changed the business, and and that they should manage their expectations a little bit. And I also caution them, because when someone takes on your work, they can do what they see fit to do with it. And so it's important that when they're deciding between offers, that they really pick someone who they think shares their vision as much as it's possible to control that. I guess I'm very honest about what the pitfalls can be so that they're not surprised. And I don't want to diminish Hollywood, but I try to take some of the starriest stars out of their eyes so that they can actually see the business at work, because it is a business. And I think everyone, you say Hollywood and everyone just suddenly sees the red carpet, and that's the very last moment of it.
Right.
And everything that leads up to that is really what has to get done right.
Right. And Candice, I want to talk to you if you could think of 3 things that when you're looking at a piece of property, what interests you the most, and how do you like to proceed? Option shopping. How do you like to work with IP?
I like owning the IP. And so I like looking to see what the licensing opportunities are across a breadth of things. So that's fashion, ancillary, being able to live on its own. If no one buys it, if we set you up, could you be set up for success just off of what you have and being able to scale that out on its own? I look at timing. So for instance, right now it's front of mind, so I'll say it. Everything that's happening in Oklahoma and the resurgence of paying attention to reparations and Black Wall Street, and Hollywood once again sort of being like, wait, what happened? We had a massacre. Remind us again what that looks like. Suddenly, when there's original work that came out from descendants that no one has seen, you start to look and you're like, my God, there's brilliance here. And timing, the timing is on its side. And then authenticity and a good person to work with. I don't like carving authors out of their deal. They should be there. They should be consultants on the project. Their voice, most of the time, great written work has a very strong point of view. That point of view should be on the screen, and maybe they need to be there helping to guide. They may not be the person who's best at adapting it, because to get funding, you want the Oscar winning writer, or at least an Emmy-winning writer. You want the best of the best doing the adaptation because they can write for the voice of an audience. But you also want the writer to be there to essentially say, the backstory actually wasn't that, and you are leaning heavily into this part, and that's not who the character is, and the audience you're seeking to attract knows this character better. This is not the move I would make, and it may seem to producers like, we don't want that voice, we have our own vision. No, because then the audience will be sitting there looking at characters that they know, love, and trust, and they will feel a level of betrayal. And when you're asking, why didn't the movie do well? You betrayed our character. Our heroine was made a damsel. That's not what we were going for. Or you made a single mom married. Like, that was not what we were going for. So it's really having that there. And then, quite frankly, the last thing in terms of at least a shopping agreement is who has the temperament. So it's one thing to love the work, but then the business of it and that person being engaged, it's the temperament of the long tail of what Hollywood is, and being able to sell, again, it's the branding and marketing. If you can go on television and sell your book, or go on TikTok and sell your book, or you have a great social media following, and I know that whoever your audience is, they are all in for you and you engage with them consistently, you do all the things for the work in one medium, then when compensated, I trust that you will do that work again for all of the derivative works and derivations of it. If that's not you, and that's the market where we are right now. Like, timing is everything. 50 years ago, I wouldn't 50 years ago, I was not necessarily in a position to do it. But
Right.
50 years ago, no one would have cared if you were also going to be your own publicist, your own marketer, all of those things. Now that is a part of the business. And so who really can lean in and give that type of ideation, or listen if that's not their strong suit? And then I like it across all genres. If it's historical, it should be historical, and you're a professor and your students love you, and you can also sell it within a university setting. You have the willingness to be not even funny, but sincere when you're doing a recording of your book. You're open to the long day and having to have tea and cough drops so that you can record. Like, are you really in it for what this side of the business actually is, which is a whole nother breadth of verticals? Or is that not what's of interest to you? And that's okay.
Right. I was just going to say, because there are people who will say, I don't want to do any of that.
And then if
And that's okay.
that's
Yeah.
100% okay.
Yeah. But be honest about it. Yeah.
And then that's not where, because again, I think it's not the emotional, it's the business side. It's not, do I love the work? Of course, the work is fantastic. Then I want you to sell all the books. You may not want to have to go and pitch and be on television talking about the book. That's okay. Or the show that comes from the book. You want to just write and sell, and that's your business. That's okay. So when it's optioning and shopping, it's do all of these other things that, instead of making it glamorous, are headaches. Like, these are
work.
not
It's
fun
work.
things. These can be headaches. This is more time in taxation. This is someone taking your work and reparsing it when you already went through a heavy duty editing experience. You feel like you've parsed it all the way out, and you do know your work better than whoever is to license or acquire it. So then it's this balance. Is that for you? And is the timing going to serve you in the way that it should, which is not within any of our control? And then, most importantly, whether I love it or not, will the market and the buyers respect it in the way that it needs to be respected based on what the industry is doing at a specific point in time, which is also not within our control. So it's a long tail lens of what's happening in the next 5 years, and having to be a little bit of a fortune teller, but then also trusting that the audience may mandate that even if they're not ready, they get ready, because people are passionate about this work and how it shows up in the world. And so those are the things that really drive me in terms of, it's a good business decision, but it's also a story that I think has longer legs, and to not give it its runway is a disservice to the work.
Ooh, I think we just lost Leah. Okay. Let me see if I can.
Oh, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Tanya, but I think we just lost Leah.
Okay. I was going to say one more thing.
Yeah, please go ahead. And if she comes back in, we'll rearrange the dots.
Everything Candice just said is why I love also attaching an entertainment attorney to a project, because they bring so much expertise and wisdom, and they are so familiar with the form, and they can get things sometimes that even your co-agents can't. So I love working with entertainment attorneys. I think they're integral, necessary, crucial to this process.
How do you prepare? Like, how do you talk? Let's say a writer comes to you and you've been approached and they say, well, I want to write the screenplay. I want to write the pilot.
I manage expectations. Okay. I'm like, if you've never written a screenplay or a pilot, I'm going to suggest you not do that. But we can absolutely build you in as a consultant, or figure out a way for you to learn on the job here. Right. I think I mean, if I'm a studio, I'm not going to put a lot of money behind someone who's never written a screenplay. It just doesn't make sense. It's a different form than the book. Right. So, but what you do, I mean, Candice said it so beautifully. What you do want is you want to have a voice in the room. That's critical. And having a good entertainment attorney, right, and having a good co-agent is how you maintain the ability to do that, right? when your work is being optioned. And so there's the question of, executive producer or producer. People don't know that they can get these credits. Sometimes you can't get EP. Sometimes you can only get producer. And, but you always push to get paid from the different pots, get credit in the field. And again, some people are very uninterested in every part of this. And some clients are really hungry. I have a client who's very talented. She absolutely wants to get into the room and figure out how to write a screenplay and how to do all of this. But she's also not crazy. So in the deal that we're working on right now, we're working on getting her good consultation rights. You know what I mean? Like getting her, having her have the right to come in and sit with the writers, having these things built in is what's going to be useful for her. And she can learn at the elbow of somebody who's done it. She can see showrunners in action. All of that is critical because there are all these moving parts. It's not just like, I have a book. And then, Idris Elba wanted to play the lead. And then Beyonce was like, this is the next movie I want to do. And then everyone was famous and everyone had millions of dollars. I think sometimes there is a crazy idea that this is how Hollywood works, and it is not. It is it makes publishing look straightforward and simple. It's the Wild West in Hollywood.
Well, I want to ask a question, I guess, to everybody, and I'll start with you, Tanya. The idea of, part of what we want at Wocstar is to see BIPOC people, writers, directors, producers, but also in the story be presented, right? So I heard a story, and I'm not going to really sort of like out the TV show, but it was written by a Black woman about a Black character, and then it was made on Netflix, and it was made with a very big star, but who wasn't of color. Now, so how do we protect these characters and these authors? What do you suggest? What are you trying to implement? And Tanya, I'll start with you.
I say, actually, this is a Candice question.
Candice, I'll start with you.
Because my experience is that we can't fully always control that. Candice, how would you build that in? I'm curious to know.
I think what you're saying is 100% right. It's trying to build a solid house on a weak foundation. If systemically the showrunners and the executives who are attached to these projects on the other side are not as passionate about representation on their end as the writer, the publisher, and the agent on this side, then there's a mismatch. It goes back to what Tanya said about funding. So when characters change, it really is about who will, not executive producers from the actual tangible brass tacks producing, but executive producers who are executive producers by virtue of raising the funds. Who are they willing to pay for? And without even taking too long, the protraction is never, we identified this actress, she's the right person, we brought her on. It's normally we've identified 10 actresses, who's available, who can shoot, who wants to do the project, who is there no beef with behind the scenes that has nothing to do with any of the players. Oh no, they got sick, they're out. Oh wait, they have a show, their show got picked up, their show's canceled. So all of the potential stars for who could be attached to the project end up ticking down. Most of the time, whoever we see on screen was the 6th or 7th choice, unless their production company is the one who's doing it. And so if it's George Clooney or Brad Pitt, it came from Plan B. They wanted to do it. But absent that, you're going down this list of timing, money, necessity, interest, and that match up. If the executive suites, and they don't reflect and appreciate the authenticity of the characters, and they rarely do, and that, like, I can be quoted, like, that's the truth. When we say that there is an issue in Hollywood in terms of representation, we are not just talking about what gets on the screen. We're talking about when people are making decisions, are they having people with voices and influence and power, not just someone at the table, but someone who can speak even when their voice is shaking and still get heard? Do you have E.F. Hutton of color in the room to essentially push the projects forward and to make that battle? And in this climate right now, we do not. And so it is highly unlikely that, I won't say it's highly unlikely, I will say it becomes increasingly difficult for networks, streamers, and buyers to feel the need to, and I can think of a project right now where the A-list talent attached, great show, writer of color, all of those things. And the show ended up being a hit, but it certainly did not reflect what it looks like on the page. Those choices boil down to money and interest. And the interest in representation post Supreme Court rulings have waned because you don't get a pat on the head for necessarily doing not the woke thing, but the right thing. You don't get there. People have been de-incentivized to operate with that level of integrity behind the scenes. And so because of that, they now are not pushing the way they should. Not only because it broadens the aperture of how you can make money, and it does, but because, quite frankly, it lends itself truth to how the book originally was crafted and the vision of the author, which as a bestseller clearly worked. So I don't think it's something you can change right now in that way.
So I totally agree with you. I have seen a couple of things that are useful. One of them is when you have a bestseller, many people want it, right? Like that can happen. And sometimes in that situation, and you guys probably know more about this than I do, but what we've been experiencing is, because we have a lot of bestsellers right now, what we've been experiencing is that when we're in that situation, we get to have a conversation around, here are the non-negotiables.
Right.
This is just simply non-negotiable.
Well, I think that's what I'm sorry, Dominique. I think that's what I was asking Tanya is when you're on, after you get the presentations for somebody wants to option, somebody wants to shop, somebody wants to, lock it up. Do you have the conversation with the author and say, the non-negotiable is these characters look the way they look in my book?
I mean, but then we have to find a way to make that contractual, right?
Right. Of course.
So if you've got a big bestseller, it's less likely that they're going to try to race switch, although you never know. But it's less, it can happen. Absolutely.
Right.
But
I think what we're seeing is competitive situations, right, Tanya? So in those situations, you've got offer A and offer B. Sometimes you can say, look, I'm sorry, this is what the author is saying.
But is it in the contract? I mean, just
yes,
that them saying that they're going to do it doesn't mean much to me in Hollywood, with all due respect.
If it's not in writing, it's not real.
And the back end to that is just, it can be in writing, but if you can't get it funded and executives want to change it, then they'll essentially say, we optioned it, we have the contract, and we'll just let the clock run out. And bring on the project where we can switch the character and get it funded. So it's one of those, I think people will placate, but then when the execution of how it shows up on screen happens, if they are finding, well, we wanted it, but we had to give on this point, then they will essentially say, and this is why writers keep your reversions so that the rights revert back to you. This way, if in fact they do what the industry tends to do, then you can say, well, at a minimum, the rights revert back. And this time it may not be with the production company I wanted, like the one I imagined, but it's with this one who actually gets me, and they'll put marketing dollars behind it, and they'll get this actress that wants to play the part that maybe everyone hasn't heard of. So it's a different tier in terms of cost, right? So it's not going to be this type of production, it's this one, but we're able to do it. But that is a sticky, I would venture to say, even in a contract, if it's not funded and they think that the only way they can fund it, and typically people will say they think they can only fund it with a certain talent attached because that's their pool of their network. And so the people that they're going to, the studios they're working with, only want to see XYZ. And so they're not willing to take that dare, then they will just let the clock tick. And then
right. Well, I think we have 1 minute left essentially, and I want to just say that I think that goes to really one of the bottom lines, that it's who you choose to work with, it's who you choose to sign that contract with, right? It's who, at least obviously there could be a bait and switch, but I think that sort of is a very important thing to sort of consider when deciding to. Even when you're on the side where you're choosing a book, if I meet the author, if I meet their team and we're just not connecting and we don't have the same vision, so like there are so many ways to gild the lily. Maybe I'm not the person to work with. Or have you? I think I'd love to hear your final thoughts in the last sort of like 40 seconds. It's quick, but Candice, why don't you start? Is there anything you'd like to leave an author that maybe is listening, or somebody who has a book that they want to see made into something on film or television? What would you leave them with?
Discipline. I think all of this is about discipline. It's discipline about being true to who your work is, being true to who your team consists of, and then also being true to the practice of all of these different verticals that are required. Selling your book, like doing the book isn't the film. Doing your book is doing the book and selling the book, which then moves into all the other things. And that's just discipline.
Wonderful. Leah, what would you like to leave with any author or writer that might be listening?
Yeah, I would say it's kind of close, but I would say research and finding your community. There are so many communities of authors and writers who work with each other. There are a lot of writing organizations that exist that are doing great work to bring more writers of color. So don't do this work alone. It's super hard to do it alone, but I think if you find the right community, the chances of you getting to publication and hopefully on screen are going to be greater.
Wonderful. Tanya, any final thoughts you'd like to share?
I think if you want to write a book, nonfiction or fiction, children's or adult, commit yourself to that craft and don't think 5 steps beyond the page, right? Stay committed to writing the very best book you can write. Educate yourself about the genre, about the publishers, about the kinds of books in that genre that have done well, right? Just be informed, compare, and comps are more than just giving them to publishers. They're what you should be comparing yourself to when you're writing. Am I at this level? Am I writing like Brian Stevenson on my subject? You know what I mean? Like, it's so important to really, how do I say this? To think holistically about writing in the way that you would think about becoming a doctor or a lawyer, right? It's not just something that you sit down because you have a word processor and you can do it. It actually requires a lot of dedication and skill and craft and thought. So
yeah.
Good pitch letters. Write good pitch letters.
Dominique, final thoughts.
I think we're living in a really interesting time, and I really appreciate being on this call with all of you. I think today's readers are new kinds of readers, and they're looking for authenticity, and they're looking for new stories, and they're looking for voice. And I am super excited about that. And that is going to change the game little by little, I admit. But, really, like all of you have said, it is about doing all of this work, but really it is about connecting with readers, and they are looking for authentic new voices. And if you're out there with one of those, talk to one of us.
Absolutely. This will be recorded and it will be on our YouTube channel, and I will make sure I have, if I can, share with them emails or ways to connect with you all in the comments. I want to say, Leah, thank you so much for being with me. Candice, Tanya, Dominique, thank you so much for being with me. I'll say this also, it's working with each one of you is such a feather in my cap, because, to see myself reflected in excellence is truly is wonderful. So thank you so much. I hope everybody who showed up enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you, Victoria. Lovely to meet everyone.
Take care.